the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from the USA Today NFL Wire. My co-host is Seth Cox from AvengeOfTheBirds.com, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site. We're in episode 375, and luckily, we are dealing with an on-schedule Cardinals team. They picked up their second win of the year over a bad Panthers team, 26-16. We're here to talk about that, Seth, but first thing let's talk about is this. The Cardinals get the win, but they still don't score in the first quarter. They still fall behind, but then come back and get the win. What were as the game was going on, what were kind of your reactions to this Cardinals team overall, and where you felt they were at and now where you feel they are at after picking up the win?
You know, during the game, you and I were texting, and it felt like we were getting to the point where it might just be a bad baseball or football team. And, you know, that makes it difficult, man. Like, you go into the season, you're excited, you want to see a lot of good things, and then all of a sudden, this team just stinks. And it's really hard to overcome that idea that your team's not good. And so, you know, while you're sitting there, while you're watching the game, you're really just thinking to yourself, man, I hope this team isn't as bad as they look.
You know, it was quite I mean, you watch the tweets, you know, we saw in the first half, clown show was the description, this team is bad. And then you start worrying, like, what? And this is kind of the thing that happened before. In the Raiders game, you're like, crap, this is a 2018 type team, only they extended everybody. And so what do we do now? It's kind of, what do we do now? Like, is it going to get, like, if they do turn it around, at what point do they do it, and can they?
Yeah, can they do it? That's a big question. And, you know, you look at some of the things from this game. You saw a team that has, you know, talent, but they seem to shoot themselves in the foot a lot. That's something that I don't think anybody is going to deny. And, you know, when you're a team that is good but not quite great, you can't have a C game. And you've seen a lot of C games from these Cardinals, and that's hard to overcome, you know, whereas like the Chiefs play a C game against the Chargers and win, right? They play an F game against the Colts and almost win. Whereas, like, if the Cardinals are going to beat the Chiefs have to play a C game and the Cardinals have to play an A game right now. And, you know, if same thing with the Rams. If the Rams, you know, the Rams played like a C game, but the Cardinals played a C game against the Rams. Whereas, you know, a team like the 49ers can play an A game, and you see the outcome. So it's just one of those situations. You have to kind of sit back and watch, and it's unfortunate that it has been this difficult, but at the same time, you do feel like they're on the right path. It's just not the path we were hoping for.
Right. Let's actually kind of start what we were going to go with. So coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web, we will start and talk about their offensive takeaways. We're going to go through the offensive takeaways. We're going to do the defensive takeaways from the game. We're going to look at J.J. Watt's situation, which was quite shocking. Look at the injuries and roster moves, what that means moving forward, and then look ahead to a very, very tough matchup at home against the Philadelphia Eagles. That's coming up on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Offensive takeaways. It was another scoreless first quarter, 3 points in the first half, and then they end up putting 23 unanswered points on the board, kind of caught fire in the second half. What is the deal in the first half that doesn't? I will say this. We kind of had on social media when Cliff King or the offense got down to scoring position, they had the fourth and 2, 4th and 1, whatever it was, and opted to go for it and then got blown up with Rondell Moore. It looked like a blown assignment instead of kicking the field goal. I stand by, philosophically, Cliff probably goes for that every time, pretty much every time that he's aggressive like that. That's but for me, situational awareness is what I think was needed there. You'd gone 3 games without scoring in the first quarter. Your defense was actually playing well. Let's reward the defense with some points on the board. Just get the field goal. Unless you were really worried about, that with the Prater injury later on, maybe that was a factor as well. But he'd already, kicked off. He actually hadn't. But get points on the board and just get that monkey off your back. After that, the offense just was out of sorts. Then you had the pick 6. It was just I don't know what it is about this offense that just doesn't. They can't get started. They need to get some rhythm, and they can never get rhythm in the first half. I do not understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and it just seems like they again tend to shoot themselves in the foot, and so instead of making things easy for themselves, they're always playing from behind the 8 ball. And I mean, you can look at this game, for instance, and they didn't shoot, or they did shoot themselves in the foot, I think, on the first drive, if I remember right. It was,
you're like, what the frick?
Yeah, so it was penalty on Zach Ertz, pass interference, so 10 yards, and then they were able to get that 10 back, right? And so it was 3rd and 4. And you're like, well, 3rd and 4. But then they run the deep shot, and Rondell Moore falls, immediately, or he slips before he even gets out of his break. And you're like, okay. And then, like you said, they get, so you're like, okay, well, that was self-inflicted. They make Carolina go 3 and out. And you're like, okay, perfect. And then they move the ball super effectively. They stopped. That's right. They stopped Carolina on 4th down, and they get the ball at the 39. So you're like, oh, short field points are guaranteed, right? And they get down to the Carolina 10, and they decide to go for it on 4th and 1, and they go into a power formation, but they run a jet sweep with Rondell Moore. and again,
there had to have been a blown assignment there, because there's no way that when you're in that set that it makes sense to have a defender run free. And
so, you look at it and you go, okay, well, then there's self-inflicted. Like, it wasn't anybody else's fault. It was their own fault. Like, yes, Brian Burns made a great play, but Brian Burns only made a great play because somebody didn't block him. And it's like, hey, that's their best player on defense. We should probably block.
What was the protection scheme where you said, yeah, we're just going to let him run free?
Yeah, right. And so it's just one of those situations where, okay, and so, like you said, the rhythm's not there. They make some questionable decisions. And this thing is, like, you can be like, okay, like 3rd and 4.
Kyler takes deep shots. Like, if there's one thing we're going to criticize, he does that, and he's been rewarded in many. Then Bruce Arians did the same thing with his offenses. Is that when you see something, when you see a play down the field, you take that shot. The problem is that they haven't been doing it. I forgot that it was especially a point where you put points on the board and kick the field goal. Even philosophically, your defense had just stopped them on 4th down. They stopped them on a turnover and downs. Reward that defense with some points.
Yeah, and that's where Cliff's being ultra aggressive came, was negative, so to speak. because like you said, at that point, with how bad your offense has been, especially in the first half of games, why not just get some points? And you and I talked about it, we texted about it, we talked about it off the air. Like, I get his point of view of like the Panthers offense is so bad. If you get points, that might be ball game right there.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're literally going from stop them inside, on their side of the 50 on 4th and 1 to you're up 7-0. And that might be all she wrote for a really bad Panthers team. So it's just, it's one of those situations.
And sometimes they outthink themselves, and we talked about this on the last show. If there's one thing that Carolina's defense is very strong at, is they stop the inside run. But they had early success running the ball, so you think that maybe they should have just gone with that, unless it was because, they had literally done the same thing to Carolina where they stopped the QB sneak, and then they stuffed Christian McCaffrey on 4th down. So I don't know. You look at the first quarter. It was punt. It was 3 and out. You had the turnover on downs, 3 and out. Then the pick 6. Then another turnover and downs. So it took till their sixth possession to finally get points on the board, and that was after a turnover. It's a takeaway. The Cardinals didn't force that turnover, but they took it away. And so, yeah, at least they got points on the board to not get 2 scores down. But yeah, the whole first half, it was totally out of rhythm. You can't say they weren't doing anything consistently well. They looked good on a couple of plays, and then they would mess up, and that would kind of end it, or they made a decision to go for it and failed. I don't know. But then you go in the second half, and they were humming. That was kind of it, is that they were humming after that. They got the touchdown after halftime, so they hold the Panthers to 3 and out, and we'll talk defense. They hold the Panthers to 3 and out in that first, and then they go and they even with the penalty, even with the penalty that they had, they still managed to get the touchdown. And after that, it was after that it went touchdown, field goal, touchdown, kneel out the clock, because that they didn't punt again the rest of the game.
Yeah, remember they were on 2nd and 15, and they threw a double screen look out of their own end zone to James Conner for 14 yards. Then Kyler Murray got a nice scamper for 2 yards and a first down, and to reset. And that's what we always talk about, right? Just reset. And then they had some big plays, Zach Ertz for 23 yards. Benjamin for 9 yards, and then they finally get one where they would have had a 43-yard touchdown pass from Murray to Marquise Brown, except C.J. Henderson did exactly what you're supposed to, right? And took the penalty. He ate the penalty, gave your defense a chance, and then Eno goes up right away 8 yards, and then again they have a beautiful design play where they run kind of like a 4 wide with Ertz in the slot, and then the other tight end runs an out, and Ertz runs a crosser, and the Panthers are completely confused, and there was nobody around Ertz when he caught that touchdown. I mean, just nobody. And it, again, you're like, you look at the plays, you look at the Connor, the 14-yard Connor screen catch. It's like, where's that play been all season? Right? You look at
you hypothesized this before the show. Is like, are they purposely holding things back while they're shorthanded on personnel?
Yeah, and it's just odd, and maybe I mean, think about this, and again, I know people are gonna be like, this is insane, but think about it. They didn't hardly practiced together. They literally didn't have a preseason together. So this was really like the first game this group has, had in terms of like if they only had 3 preseason games, right? And so, they came out in the first half. They, like we said, they shot themselves in the foot, whether it be coaching, or assignments or whatever it is. They shot themselves in the foot, but they screwed up. And then in the second half, all of a sudden they're doing all this stuff. I mean, we've seen Kyler take a couple shots with Marquise Brown, but that was the first time it felt like it was like wide open, right? Like you're like, oh, this was like a great play call, because he, like, if CJ Henderson doesn't just grab him to make sure he doesn't catch it, it's 6 without question. And and then they come back and you see, again, you just see a nice mix and match of things. They come back, they go on a really, really long drive. They get the ball with 5:48 left. And then they don't score until 11:26. So 9 minutes of game time goes off, and they get a field goal. 9 minutes and 26 seconds. Then they cause the turnover, right? And like you said, we'll talk about the defense. Defense was phenomenal. But they cause the turnover on one of their 5 deflected passes, and they run a quarterback power. And again, it's like, Carolina had no chance. Like
it reminded me of the touchdown he had against the Bears when, like, he was celebrating 5 yards out. Like, he knew the second he started running, he knew he was getting into the end zone, and it kind of looked like that.
And so it's just like, again, it's like, where have these play designs been? And I'm not like, that's why I know it's a stupid conspiracy theory, but you're just like, where's that creativity been the whole time? Like, easy, not difficult, easy scores. But like you said, after the punt in the second quarter, that ended up being a field goal for the Panthers. And you really felt like at that point, you're like, oh crap, right? Like,
oh no, the mountains, it's the snowball's happening. It's kind of what you're like, especially because they got that first interception, and then they go 3 and out, and then give up the field goal to end the half. You're like, come on, not again.
Yeah, and so it's just, it's insane. It was a lot of. But the second half, like you said, the second half was exactly what, I mean, let's be honest. We're not going to expect them to go touchdown, field goal, touchdown, in any half. But it is nice to see them be able to still have that, when you still have that ability, right?
Yeah, and it comes down as everyone talks about the need to use Kyler's legs. I've always felt that it doesn't need to be a lot, but they need to unlock it just a little bit. And it seems to open things up. Whether it has purposely, the way Kyler spoke last week, was that he's following, it's basically what he's being asked to do. And so there's a little bit of that. I know the Rams, it was difficult to use his legs because of the way they were defending him. But it's undeniable what they don't tend to lose when he runs, when he has at least 10 rushing attempts. And usually, I know he had 12, and 3 of those were kneel downs technically. And I'm guessing that in several of those games that they won, the kneel downs might have gotten him over that threshold of 10 carries, but that's part of it. Like, if your quarterback is kneeling down 3 times at the end of the game, that's good.
Right, exactly. That's the optimal way to use the run. And so, we're seeing a couple things. One, we're seeing the effectiveness of the running back by committee. And I know that's going to drive people crazy because you paid James Conner to be a lead back. But, if he's the guy that ends the game and you're getting, 10 carries and 60 yards or 55 yards, sorry, on 9 carries from your other two backs. I mean, we're talking 6 yards a carry. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then James Conner's only getting you 3.5 yards a carry, but that's okay because he's doing it in situations where you're trying to score on the 2-yard line or it's late in the game and you're just trying to get a first down. That's fine. And then you're seeing that Marquise Brown, man, he is a wide receiver 1, isn't he?
He can be. And given the opportunity he has, and we've seen, and that touchdown catch, both the throw and the catch were breathtaking on that touchdown that he had, because that's kind of what you want to see from your top receiver. You want to see Kyler, because we've seen Kyler make those dime throws time after time after time. But to finally get a guy that makes a play like that is really nice. And you're starting to see now, the more comfortable he gets, and he's more a part of the game plan, that, he's now had 22 catches for 228 yards in the last 2 weeks. And that's good stuff.
Yeah, and then you've got Zach Ertz, who's not the he's not the big play guy he used to be, but he is a very reliable receiver, which is so important in this offense. Somebody that can give you those tough yards, and that's what he's getting right now. He's only averaging about 8 yards of reception, but he's on pace for like 85 and 800, and that there's nothing wrong with that.
Definitely not, and that's going to set, like, he tied the franchise record for catches by a tight end in only 11 games last year with 56. And I think that what he did last year, I think it projected out to about 75 and 750. I think is what it would have come out to, is 75 and 750 over the 17-game season, which Cardinals, they've never had a tight end do that.
No, exactly. And so that's just the way you look at it. And I think it's been a good mix. And you have to think that once they get back their biggest playmaker, how is it going to affect the rest of the team in a positive way?
And they were doing this without Hopkins or AJ Green. Now, something AJ Green was, but their size, they're not doing with Hopkins, they're not doing it with Green, they're not doing with Wesley either. And so all of their size was gone. They were doing what they did last week was with midget receivers.
Right. And so, it's been fun to watch, man. And they're getting when they're on, because you can see that they still have that talent.
And so the question is, can they carry it over? Because now granted, it was basically the Kyler show against Las Vegas, and then they came out and were methodical against the Rams, but weren't able to finish. They were slow, but then do you think maybe that second half unlocks the offensive performance from here on out? Because the Oakland game, it was basically Kyler. Then they moved the ball, and now they moved the ball and scored points. Do you think, or is it just a hope that this is the start of what the offense is supposed to look like?
I think it's just the start of what the offense is supposed to look like. I really do.
All right. Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best ever Cardinals talk on the web, let's talk to not the defensive side of the ball, which has been, over the last 10 quarters, quite good. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best ever Cardinals talk on the web, talking about the Cardinals defense, which, now granted, we knew going into this game that the defense was probably going to have a good game because, let's face it, the Panthers, through 4 games, have yet to even get 300 yards of offense. The Cardinals held them to 220 total yards of offense. They held them to 2 of 10 on third down. They only scored 3 points on offense before it was garbage time. Like that touchdown they scored at the end of the game was frantic time. So the defense was not expected to be the strength of this team, and it has been what has been keeping this team together so far. How surprising is that for you?
It's been a steady improvement, which is nice to see, right? They've gotten better, obviously, since game 1, but like we talked about, game 1 didn't count.
They were a mess. So game 1, scrap that. First 2 quarters of the Raiders game, but then shut them down. And honestly, against the Rams, they gave up too many explosive plays, but for the most part, you look at the game plan, the defense performed about as well as you could expect against that team. The way they limited Devontae Adams in week 2, the way that they limited Cooper Kupp in week 3. The defensive backs have not been the problem, and the quarterback position was a huge question mark, and things are looking good out there right now. And Antonio Hamilton's on the way back. So you have 3 guys that you should feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and so you just look at the defense. We talked about it. They're finally getting they're getting home a little bit more often, which, you know how I feel about pressures. And so to see Zach Allen and Dennis Gard
got his first sack since 2020.
Yeah, both getting it was huge. I thought the other thing in this game, and it's something crazy, but like watching Allen and JJ Watt basically stop trying to get sacks and instead just playing basketball defense and getting 5 passes defended by two your starting linemen.
That's
it's
fun.
Absurd.
That's fun. Well, and JJ Watt's had made a career out of it. So when he doesn't get sacks, he has kind of a feel for impact to knock balls down. Zach, I don't remember the stat, but I remember he did it a ton in college when he was at Boston College. He was super productive. He had massive amounts of tackles, but he also would get his hand. So Zach Allen now looks like the player that the Cardinals, we see from him now what we thought that the Cardinals thought he would be. It's just taken a while.
Yeah, it's crazy to see because he's been so good. And you and I have talked a lot about the issue with Zach Allen, right? And truth be told, it's been his health.
Yeah, it was his health, and his health might have been affected by the fact that he needed to build his NFL body. Vance said it a couple of times this year. He needed to transform his body as a rookie in year 2. Those injuries probably might have been contributed to the fact that he needed to be bigger and stronger, and he's done that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like it's crazy that it's taken this long, and there's been so many injuries along the way as he was dealing with it. But in that sense, he has really done a nice job of continuing to grow as a player and become a more well-rounded and, quite frankly, like you said, like borderline dominant player in the NFL.
Right. And he it felt like he had the chance to be a Watt-like player without actually being J.J. Watt, because J.J. Watt, when he was at the top of his game, was, Aaron Donald-like in terms of his impact on games. But yeah, Zach Allen has been absolutely fantastic.
Well, and the other guy
having Watt on the field, yes,
huge deal. And the other guy that's really starting to come into his own is Zaven Collins. he's becoming like, even on the play where Christian McCaffrey caught the touchdown pass.
He was step for step with him.
Yeah, he just doesn't understand. He just doesn't understand exactly how to play it yet. But I mean, not many people know how to guard.
Well,
Christian McCaffrey.
It was interesting because of how the type of coverage that he had on him. I think Zaven looked surprised that Baker actually attempted to throw it to him in that situation.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the maturation, right? That even though you think you have good coverage, a player like Christian McCaffrey dictates you still throw the ball that way.
Yeah. And what it's nice to see, and maybe it's just lack of patience, but as bad as we've seen Zaven Collins be at times, but we saw the flashes. Like when he doesn't hesitate, like he knows where he's going, you see the size, you see closing speed, and just how good he can be. And it's been fun because ever since they gave him, like he literally took the Jordan Hicks role. Like in the offseason, it was like they didn't want to do it. Like they were worried about giving it to him. And then since he's had it, his plays got consistently better. And those mistakes are disappearing. And now he's not perfect, but you're seeing, last year he gave up plays. And kind of with Isaiah, he made plays last year and he gave up plays. Now he's cutting down on the mistakes and increasing his playmaking, which turns you into a very good player.
Yeah, and it just allows you to stay on the field. And that's just it. So now he's making the plays he's expected to, and he's not missing plays, which is big. And then you've got the fact that he is able to help control and line up the defense, which is important. And then you've got the fact that he's super athletic. So like that first 4th and 1 we talked about, right? Like he's the guy that made the play. And even if you are really good, being able to stop Christian McCaffrey is really, really difficult. And so for him to make that play was huge. And so it's just fun to see the maturation come into play. And even, Isaiah Simmons played, 83% of the snaps.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the number was, but 83% of the snaps. Now, I think some of that was because Nick Vigil, I think it's because Nick Vigil got hurt. And so it's one of those situations where, you see maybe he got an extra 19 snaps because he played 19 off ball or linebacker snaps, because his other snaps were in the slot, at corner, at free safety. So,
and that's very interesting to see how I'm super intrigued with the way that Vance Joseph is utilizing his personnel this year, and how creative he's had to be. One, because he wants to find ways for Simmons to be in there, but then trust Nick Vigil, and then the kind of the rotation of linebackers with Vigil and Tanner Vallejo and Ben Neiman, and they're all getting playing time, and all of that I think has been because he hasn't really felt that he had 3 cornerbacks he could trust. Now against the Rams, because they go 3 wide, like they go 3 receiver, you had almost no choice, and that's why Jace Whitaker plays so much. But basically the rest of those games, he's piecemealing his personnel without having to put 3 cornerbacks on the field. And I'm interested in seeing how that changes with the return of Hamilton, whether it's this week or the next week. If the linebacker usage changes because he can go with a more traditional secondary.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch and see, and hopefully if it does change, it changes in a positive way for Isaiah Simmons, right?
Right, and that he can, then he can settle into linebacker play and kind of go from there. Any other takeaways other than, this defense? It's now granted Carolina's offense is bad, Do you think, well, we'll preview the game later, but do you think that the defense has the talent to slow down a Philadelphia Eagles team? We'll talk about how they have to, but is this defense rounding into form to be able to limit an Eagles team that's averaging over 28 points a game?
No, probably not. But we also saw that it's not uncommon. I mean, look at the best defense in the NFL, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers just got worked over by the Kansas City Chiefs offense. So it's tough, but they have, if what you've seen so far, I think you have to be pleasantly surprised and expect they can do more than what we expected.
Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. I have an interesting, shocking, and kind of a scary situation with J.J. Watt. Let's talk about what that meant and what we think's moving forward. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. J.J. Watt surprised everyone. We knew that he had a calf injury. I personally missed the Thursday injury report changed to calf/illness. I missed that. I didn't remember seeing that. But apparently he was down for illness, and then Sunday morning he tweets out, and we didn't know what to think. He went to AFib on Wednesday. They shocked his heart back in the rhythm on Thursday, and then he played on Sunday, and he got really emotional about it after the game because it was the first time he talked about being scared, especially in a situation. He's been injured a lot. He's had a lot of surgeries, but now in the situation where they're waiting, they're expecting a baby in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it just changes your perception and your, you as a dad know, like all of a sudden it's a different type of thought process. Because you're not just thinking about yourself.
Right. And it's just, and people wonders like, well, should he have played? There's on AZ Central, there was an interview and a story based on now I will make this clear. This was not one of J.J. Watt's docs. It's not one of the team medical people. It was just a doctor who, when you have a heart that goes into AFib, he recommended doing an ablation, basically a procedure on the heart, to basically take away that possibility, kind of fix that. But it requires blood thinners, then he'd be out for a couple months, and that would allow him to, like the doc was saying, he recommended he take it right now. He wasn't Watt's doctor. His doctor said, and he talked to a lot of people, that he's fine to play. And from what I understand, my wife works in the medical field, and she said that that's something that can happen. It doesn't appear that that's something that's been chronic for him. It's probably something that could return. It could return this week. It could return in 5 years. It might never, ever happen again. But, when the doctors gave him the clearance to play, like, why wouldn't you play? Especially when you know the type of competitor that Watt is. Like, it would be like the doctors say, I'm okay, I feel okay, but I'm still not going to play. I'm just, like, if there's no greater risk than there already was, just, anyone like me, sitting down at a computer and writing, if I had it happen, and like, if he's not at any greater risk from playing football to have that happen to him than I am just, sitting on my couch and writing on my laptop, then of course he's going to play. And then he played a very good game, whether there was a little extra to it or just the fact that he's playing well and being more impactful statistically than he was last season. It was hard to see, one. Two, you could tell how upset he was about the leak because, anybody said injuries, whatever, that's football. You can leak that. But when it comes to something like that, he doesn't understand how that information got out. So he got out ahead of it before whoever was going to report it.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, your wife works in the medical field. I work in the medical field. Like, I can talk about this now because it's news. But like, when I worked at Barrow Neurological Institute. I was part of a team that saw the Diamondbacks GM's wife that just recently passed away. And like, they are going out and saying, hey, we are going through this. These are the doctors that are treating us. These are, and so, even then, there's still a lot of gray area about what you can say, not say, things of that nature. And so when stuff like that happens in healthcare, like, you're literally supposed to keep all of this information private. I mean,
that's law.
Yeah. I've been in healthcare. I'm 36 now. I've literally been in healthcare, whether it be pharmacy or chemotherapy research, or now radiation, oncology. Like, I've literally been doing this since I was 18 years old. So I've been doing this 18 years. The names, the famous people I've seen, the famous people I've met, the famous people I've treated, like, all of this stuff, like, it's something that happens and you just roll with it. You don't text your friends. You're like, hey, guess who came into the office today? And so it's disheartening as a healthcare worker, first off, because it's just such a breach of ethics and the trust that patients in general put in us. And so if it came from a healthcare worker, that's super disappointing. But it's also one of those situations that happens because, unfortunately, there are people that look at it and say, hey, I can get $5,000 if I leak this information to, somebody. So why wouldn't I do that? Or $2,000, or, whatever it is. And depending on the person, whatever the situation is. But that was the thing, is like, I go back to, the Hazen situation. I mean, they're publicly out there talking about what she's going through, talking about where she's being treated, the doctors that are treating her. I literally work for these people, and I still don't even talk about it with my friends, close family. Like, I don't even mention it to my wife, really, like, because it's one of those situations. Like, I actually didn't say anything to my wife about that situation until she passed away. And I was like, oh, she was a patient of ours that when I was there, like, that was really difficult, like, because she was young and things of that nature. And it's like, and she's the one putting out the information, right? Like, she's saying, this is what I have, this, what I'm doing. And it's still not my place. Like, I'm not, that it's still not anything I am going to talk about, because it's their life, it's their health. And so that, to me, is the most disappointing aspect of this whole thing, because you breached the privacy of a family and a man. Like, he's already going through enough, right? Like, I don't think people realize what it's like to have to go through something like that. And trust me, like, I actually worked at Banner Heart Hospital for 4 years. And so I know a little bit about what was going on. And so when I say this, I'm not saying it as a callous person, but like, it's a fairly normal and nondescript situation.
Yeah. I mean, it sounded pretty. You put him under, you shock him, heart goes back into rhythm. That's because when you shock the heart, it tends to do that. It either goes back in rhythm, it stops, or it starts again. So it's
right. And so when the news broke, and the funniest thing is that the news broke, I tried not to get on my phone Sunday morning before the game starts, because it's been slightly negative within the fan base right now. And so try to stay positive heading into the game. And my manager emailed me, and she goes, hey, are you not going to write about the JJ Watt thing? And I'm like, what? JJ Watt thing. like I literally had no idea. And so like you read about it and you're like, oh, well, that's unfortunate that it leaked. It's scary as hell for a 32-year-old man that's in good shape to be like, oh my gosh, I have an issue with my heart. Like that's just scary, especially for, like you were saying, like an expectant father for the first time. Like whether it's the first time or the fifth time, it's still a scary aspect, but it's going through your head. And so for somebody to be willing to like leak that information, and now there's more pressure on him to talk about it and discuss it. I can tell you too, like I don't know if I text you guys, I don't know who I text, but like I read the McManaman article, and that bothers me, because like you said, like
it's just a random doctor.
Right. It's not his doctor. It's not a guy that has seen his chart. I mean, trust me, this guy knows a lot. He's been in school forever.
Well, what he suggested is a standard procedure for it.
Right. And it just sucks that they would, because all it does is send this wave of ambiguity over the fan base, right? Yeah. And I understand what McManaman's doing. Like he's talking to an expert and getting what he believes is the medical opinion of what they need to do. But like every patient is different, and every situation is different and unique. And so in that case, it's just, you have to go by what JJ's doctor is saying, not by a doctor that's in California that, yes, has done probably thousands of these procedures, but not even close to connecting with JJ Watt.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move and talk about some of the injuries and the roster moves that are coming up that they have. What does it mean, and what concerns are they? That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best hour Cardinals talk on the web, and well, lo and behold, the Cardinals made a couple roster moves. Obviously, the one we noticed during the game was the fact that Matt Prater wasn't right. Now, he had a right hip. He was on the injury report all last week. But the fact that they didn't bring any kickers in at all, we felt, okay, Prater's going to be fine. The problem was he didn't finish the game. So the hip was bothering him. Eno Benjamin kicked off 3 times. They went for 2-on-1 after 1 touchdown because Prater didn't feel good enough to kick. They bring in 4 kickers on Monday, and they sign up Matt Amendola, who filled in for Harrison Butker for the Chief for a couple of weeks, who got hurt against the Cardinals, and they blamed the field. He's now on the practice squad, so there is a real possibility that Prater will not be able to go. But that wasn't even the surprising one. The surprising move is the Cardinals signed Billy Price off the Raiders practice squad, a guy that we hypothesized, we guessed could be a possibility to replace Rodney Hudson if Hudson had decided to retire. And now they sign him off the practice squad, and we're left wondering, wait, why? Why did they sign Billy Price? Justin Pugh has an injury to his elbow. He didn't finish the game on Sunday. He had the injury issue this last week. He left the game against the Rams, but returned. And so my first guess was this. Billy Price is an addition because they plan on Sean Harlow playing, because you don't need Billy Price to be a backup center or your third string center when you already have a rookie you're developing, 1 or 2, if you have Sean Harlow, unless they're done with Harlow, which they don't apparently not because they didn't cut him. So it feels like, 1, Pugh isn't going to play, Harlow will start, or 2, something's up with Rodney Hudson, which means Harlow would start.
Yeah, all those situations sound awful, right?
None of them sound good coming up against a defensive line. That includes Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox.
And you look at it, we talked a little bit about it. Cody Ford's still not.
He's a couple weeks away. It's kind of what Cliff said. He's a couple weeks away. And
so now you're on your, like you said, your third string guard, and I assume Max will start. Wouldn't you assume so?
I don't know. That's about the thing about the move that I'm kind of surprised at.
Well, so when Pugh went out initially, Max came in.
Yeah. So yes, Max came in for him against the Rams, and then initially he finished the game as well in Carolina. But it was Harlow who started in week 1 for them.
But that was like Max had just gotten back with the
the question is, like, for me, maybe because I've kind of always felt that they had Harlow kind of higher than Max. I don't know, but maybe because Harlow had only gotten reps at center, they didn't want to use him as a replacement guard, because then it leaves you with no backup center if anything happens to him during the game. Which for me suggests it's probably Harlow. I'm hoping that's the case, because I don't want to think about the possibility that Rodney Hudson's not going to play this week.
Yeah, and so maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's Harlow is now starting at left guard, and they want, like you said, a backup at center, and so Harlow, or because of the depth issue, that now they have Harlow as your backup guard and Price as the backup center. That's the only thing I can think.
That's kind of what that is. And I will say, Max Garcia, as much as they like him, like one of the first plays that he came into the game, that blew up the play that they had, because what was it that I can't remember what play it was, but it ended up going for like, Kyler running and got.
Oh yeah.
It was because Max got totally blown up and kind of blew up everything that led to that. But yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the addition of Billy Price unless because when you sign a guy off a practice squad, you're committing 3 weeks of salary. That's a little bit of the logistic thing. He doesn't have to be on the roster for 3 weeks, but you are guaranteed he's going to pay. Maybe it simply is because of that, is that if they know that Pugh's going to miss some time, Cody Ford's not back yet, so they want a veteran backup in there. So whether it's Max or Sean Harlow that's playing, they want another guy for depth, and then maybe Price is really short term, and they will cut him loose once Cody Ford comes back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes the most sense, unless they're gonna move on from Harlow, which doesn't make sense, but he also hasn't been good. So I mean, who knows? I mean, at this point.
That's true. When by the time you guys listen to the show, that probably will kind of have the answer to that. Actually, I don't think we'll necessarily have the answer. Rodney Hudson wouldn't practice on Wednesday anyway, and neither would Pugh. So we think they will miss practice Wednesday anyway. It's just whether they have an injury designation. We know that Pugh will have the elbow listed. Will Hudson, and Hudson did leave the game, but didn't miss any snaps. Did leave the game after the fourth down bad fumble, but it was weird because he came back into the game. So whether it's his hand or his knee or or he decided, no, I'm done with this, I don't know. But that is the move that you were like, oh, wait, what? That's was the question there. And then Andy Isabella, no longer on the team. They released him on Tuesday, which suggests to me that at minimum they will get AJ Green back. AC Green, holy cow, that's an old name from the NBA. AJ Green back, and probably Antoine Wesley. And I think Antoine Wesley is the more certainty. It's the more certain one coming off of IR this week to be ready. But Andy Isabella, one of the more disappointing. Granted, he's only he was a late second round pick, but still one of the more disappointing picks because, well, one, everyone loved the pick coming out of the draft. Two, he was super likable to start. He looked like you were going to have this impact player from a small school, and then just nothing. But this was a long time coming. Luckily, he's not a vested veteran, so they don't have to pay his full salary. So
yeah, and I mean, you just look at it; it's one of those situations. He he never clicked. And the issue becomes that he is a guy that was drafted in front of guys that have been Pro Bowlers and all
Forever
pro.
connected to DK Metcalf. Forever connected to that because he was taking 2 picks before Metcalf. Metcalf's been a baller. He's been a stud. And the Cardinals could have had Metcalf. But we know contextually is that they didn't see Andy Isabella. They didn't draft Andy Isabella to do what DK does. They drafted him to be a slot guy, and he never became a slot guy either. So, bad on their part. Cliff liked him and seemed to continue to like him, but he never developed into a good slot guy, and he wasn't good enough to play ahead of the guys that they had on the outside. So what you had was a fast special teams guy that everyone hoped would do something but never did. And then when he was given permission to seek a trade, nobody wanted him. I will be surprised personally if he gets picked up in waivers. He's fast, but he doesn't offer much on special teams. Maybe something in the return game, but maybe he'll get picked up on the practice squad somewhere. But I don't know what's next for Andy Isabella.
Yeah, and like you said, he's fast. He doesn't catch the ball extremely well. He does run decent routes, but like you said, it's mostly from outside, which is odd for a guy his size. So
yeah, and then the moves that happened on Tuesday seem to suggest that Colt McCoy will be. Well, we know that Antonio Hamilton, Antoine Wesley, and Colt McCoy were all designated to return. That means they can practice. It doesn't mean that they'll be back this week, but it feels like Colt McCoy probably will get activated this week, and that Antoine Wesley will probably get activated this week. I know Colt McCoy isn't a sure thing. They cut Jarrett Guarantano off the practice squad when they signed the kicker, and so now they've got three quarterbacks. I mean, if Colt's not ready, they could push it another week, but I'm guessing Colt will be the backup this week. Wesley will get some playing time, and Trace McSorley gets cut and ends up on the practice squad again.
Yeah, that makes the most sense.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals Talk on the web, we will wrap things up with the final segment where we talk about the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, the 4-0 Philadelphia Eagles coming to town to take on the Cardinals, who have not won at State Farm Stadium for seems like forever now. Let's preview that game, make our predictions. What do we think is coming next? That's coming next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals Talk on the web, and the Philadelphia Eagles and all of they have been good. They have been very good so far this year. They are 4-0. They are clicking on offense and on defense. Jalen Hurts is playing actually, he's not hurting them. He's been productive, but they're doing everything well. They're running the ball extremely well, which they have. They've got playmakers at receiver with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Dallas Goedert, their tight end is still very good. So there really is no real weakness to their game except that they might be without their kicker, which means they might have a kicker off the street. I don't know what this game, but historically, if you look at this team, it's this is going to be rough. It's going to be a rough game because everything's going. So you've got a high-powered offense, with the Cardinals struggling offensively to keep up, which seems to think, okay, how are they going to keep up with the Eagles? And they also play extremely well defensively over the first 4 weeks of the season. They have 16 sacks and 10 takeaways. That is something else.
Yeah, the biggest thing this weekend is going to be about the Cardinals' ability to run the football. You look at what the Eagles do well, and like you said, it's kind of everything on offense. And so what do? Well, you keep the ball out of their hands. Kind of like
this is the game. Their offense has to be good, or they will have no chance.
Yeah, kind of like what you saw with them against the Rams, but the difference is you have to finish in this game. If you look at the weakness of the Eagles defense, and that's putting it harshly, it is rushing. They give up 5 yards per carry, but that's the thing, is that they don't face a whole lot of rushing attempts. You look at their rushing attempts against, and it's 80, which is the second least in the NFL. And you look at their rushing attempts for, and it's 153, which is the most in the NFL. So that's the thing, is like teams don't run the ball a lot against them, and it's because they get up early and hey, they don't have to worry about them teams running on them. So this is the week where the Cardinals really need their game to wrong and kind of dictate the pace, and then be able to throw the ball off of that. If they're able to do that, then they have a chance, because what that'll do is that'll, like you said, that'll put the onus on Jalen Hurts. He's been very good this year. But I mean, he's only thrown 4 touchdowns, not thrown for 1,120 yards, but he's only thrown for 4 touchdowns. They have 10 rushing touchdowns on the season. He has been sacked 9 times, so they do give up some sacks. And so that's going to be what they need to do if they're going to be successful.
The Cardinals have had the Eagles' numbers, so if you look at their last kind of bit, the Cardinals are 6-2 dating back to the NFC Championship game. Interesting fact, the Philadelphia Eagles have never won in State Farm Stadium ever since it was opened. They've never won there. The only games that they've beaten the Cardinals since then have been in Philadelphia. And this will be the second time Jalen Hurts faces the Cardinals. The Cardinals beat him in 2020. You had Jalen Hurts. He played really well, but the Cardinals' offense was much better. So, yeah, this is the game where you worry about a couple of things. There are some really, really important matchups. Obviously, with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, how they defend those receivers will be important. Hassan Reddick is, we know him. We know what he can do. He's had 3.5 sacks in the last 2 weeks. That'll be a tough task for Kelvin Beachum, where he rushes on that side mostly. And then you look at the interior, especially if the Cardinals are going to be going with the backup. If you look at Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis, just the freakish production and athleticism that they both have. And we talked about Jordan Davis leading up to the draft. That kid is, you said it. He comps physically closer to a grizzly bear than any NFL player that there's ever been before. And if you're going with Sean Harlow or Max Garcia instead of Justin Pugh and Rodney Hudson, you are really at a disadvantage, especially when you want to be able to control the point of the attack right up there. And you want Kyler to have a clean pocket, and you want to open holes for your runners.
Yeah, and that's what they need. And like you said, it's just going to be about being able to keep them at bay. On the season, Reddick has 3.5 sacks. Brandon Graham has 3 sacks. Fletcher Cox has 3 sacks. Josh Sweat has 2.5 sacks. So they're getting production from everywhere. And then, you talked about it. James Bradbury and Darius Slay each have 2 interceptions already on the season. Their corners are a strength, and so it'll be interesting to see how that affects everything. This is a good team, man. Like, it's going to be a good challenge for the Cardinals to see where they're at in terms of the pecking order for the NFL. It's just really interesting that you look at a team that's 4th, I believe, in scoring offense. Yeah, 4th, and they only have 4 touchdown passes. Like, that's really, really hard to understand. I mean, Brown has 1, Devontae Smith has 1, Dallas Goedert has 1, and then Quez Watkins has 1. But like, they get inside the red zone, and Jalen Hurts is such a menace. He has 4 rushing touchdowns already. Miles Sanders has 3. They have 10 as a team. Like, it's just crazy to see. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out overall, and what this does. This is a game where I come into it and I see a game where the Cardinals are not going to win. So
right, and this is a game. Now, like before the season, you looked at the game that you hope that they would win, but it's not a must win. I mean, it kind of is, because the Cardinals have gone 7 straight games to State Farm Stadium without winning. You can't be a good team and lose at home consistently. It's a conference game. But here's the way I see it. I see it kind of like the Rams game, but a win, especially how they've played for the first 4 games of the season, both teams, this is a reset expectations type of game for them, where really what we hope to see is that they compete and can be close in this game, so that they're not getting boat raced, but that they're playing they're at least playing competitive, where they're not completely overmatched. Because then you have the hope, okay, they can win in Seattle, hopefully, and then be 3-3 and all is happy. But this would reset expectations, put them in a position to go 4-2 without Hopkins, which would be a great situation to be in, to knock off the best team in the NFC right now, playing the best football in the league. Really would be a confidence booster. It's something the fans need. But do I expect that to happen? Do I think it'll happen? I think it can happen, but I'm not banking on that. Even Mr. Optimist here, I do not have this pegged as a win, but I want the Cardinals to be competitive, and I think they will make it a competitive game, because even as good as the Philadelphia defense has been, they can give up points. They gave up 21 points to the Jaguars last week. They gave up 35 to the Lions. Now, the Lions have been scoring on everyone, but if the Cardinals are in rhythm on offensively, I think that they will be able to keep up at minimum with the Eagles. And if the defense can make a couple of stops, get a turnover, and the offense takes care of the ball, there is a chance that they can make the upset. I just don't expect it.
Yeah, and that's how I kind of look at it. And you talked about it. I jokingly talked with Justin the other night on our podcast about how, has a team in the NFL ever been first in scoring and last in scoring defense? Because we could see that with the Detroit Lions this year. So that's, like you said, their onslaught is interesting. But the Vikings offense is average. The Commanders offense is really, really, really bad. Who's to say that
the Cardinals offense has been bad and good, but mostly bad.
Right, exactly. And so we'll see. This is the game, like you said, where I don't want to say you're okay with the loss, but you're looking at this and you're saying, like, hey, show us that you can be competitive before the troops all get back, right? And then you can make a final judgment. If they come out flat again and look incompetent again, it's just going to be disheartening.
Absolutely. And with that, my expectation, I wrote this for Sports Weekly as my preview, and it's kind of what I'm looking at moving forward with this game. I think the Cardinals will offensively find the rhythm, but will be overmatched. I have the Eagles coming away with a 31-27 win.
Yeah, and I think that's about right. I would say, 31-27, 31-28 is about right.
And if that is the way it goes, depending on how that goes, because what you'd like to see is to not come down to, for in particular, because I'm tired of hearing all the shots people take at Kyler Murray, and his talent. And I don't want it to be because of a mistake he makes, he does a bad pick six or bad interception in clutch time when he's trying to move down the field and turns the ball over. I don't want that to happen. I just want to be. I'd rather this be a game where the defense is overmatched by a very talented Eagles team. But I wouldn't put it past the Cardinals in this sort of situation to finally get things going. They have a little bit of rhythm with the second half of that game. This would be, and in fairness, this is also a Zach Ertz revenge game, right?
Right, exactly. So
Hassan Reddick already had his revenge game last year with the Panthers, so this is not a revenge game for Reddick. He'll be up for that game no matter what.
Well, and let's be honest, the Cardinals tried to bring him back to sign him again. So
they did.
I mean, he's not what's the revenge for? They they wanted him back. He just got more money from his hometown.
He did.
Who can get mad at that?
No. So this is a Zach Ertz revenge game. Yeah, pretty much that. So with that, is there anything else of note that we need to bring up for this game in particular? It could be a game of backup kickers. because, Jake Elliott's banged up. I think the Eagles brought in some kickers on Tuesday to look at, and the Cardinals signed Matt Amendola. I would guess, if I had to guess right now, that if there's any doubt at all that Prater wouldn't make it through the game, that they will decide to go with Amendola instead of Prater. Problem being with that, he's not good in long distances. He's 2 of 5 from 40. He's never hit a 50-yarder in his NFL career.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously you'd like them to be healthy, but it's game 5. 2 and 3 is not the worst thing in the world, and having Prater deep in the season is way more important than winning one game or potentially losing one game and Prater.
Absolutely. With that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, Best of our Cardinals talk of the web on the web. This is episode 375. It's in season, so of course we will be back again next week, hopefully talking about a surprise upset Cardinals win, but at minimum, hopefully it's not dealing with, oh crap, the Cardinals are bad again, where we worry about them beating the Seattle Seahawks on the road, who suddenly are scoring points, and Geno Smith looks like the quarterback you always thought he could be when he came out of college, right? You're just a decade
right.
too. You were a decade early on your evaluation.
Exactly.
With that, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Rue. This is the Rise Up See Red podcast. We'll be back again next week. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Roll!